This anime begins with our protagonist named Kyosuke Kosaka, who is awakened by his younger sister named Kirino, who treats him with respect and love, something that seems quite strange to him, as his real sister would never treat him that way. It turns out that it was all just a dream. Later, we see Kyosuke having breakfast, and as he does so, it is explained to us that his younger sister is very talented in everything she does, and their parents never stop praising her. This frustrates Kyosuke, and he leaves for school as soon as possible to avoid hearing their praise. In class, he meets Manami Tamura, the protagonist's classmate and childhood friend, who, according to Kyosuke's own words, represents his ideals as the most normal person he has ever seen. Manami is delighted to hear this, even though he didn't mean it as a compliment, but as a fact. During the class, Kyosuke can't help but feel rejected, as every subject he had today reminded him of how amazing younger sisters are, which ends up completely destroying him. After classes, the protagonist heads back home, and upon entering, he encounters Kirino, who completely ignores him. He decides to do the same and goes to the fridge to get some orange juice. After finishing his juice, Kyosuke heads to his room but realizes he forgot to put the juice back in the fridge. As he returns to do so, he accidentally bumps into Kirino, causing both of them to drop their bags. He tries to help his sister pick up her bag, but she refuses. She quickly takes her bag and leaves, and Kyosuke notices an object under the table. When he picks it up, he opens the object, which is a CD box. He realizes that it's a game featuring little sisters as the main characters who must establish a deep bond with their older brothers. This startles Kyosuke, and just as his mother arrives, he hides the game and quickly goes to his room, fearing that his family would despise him if they saw him with such material. While in his room, he starts to wonder who the owner of the game could be, which is called Love with Little Sister. After a long thought, he realizes that the only possible owner of the game is his younger sister. Later, we see Kyosuke attempting a plan to confirm that Kirino is the owner of the game. He tells his mother that one of his friends has a fetish for anime, to which both she and his father recommend him not to follow in his friend's footsteps, as it's a bad hobby that could burn his brain. All of this suggests that neither his father nor his mother are the owners of the anime game. Just then, Kirino panics and starts acting strangely, leaving the table without finishing her meal. After this, Kyosuke tells his parents that he's going to the store to buy some things, and as he's leaving, he notices the light in Kirino's room turning on. He rushes to check who's there. Upon entering her room, Kyosuke finds Kirino searching for her game. When she's caught in the act, she tries to deny that the game belongs to her. After a long conversation, the protagonist returns her game and tells her that there's nothing wrong with having such interests, and he's not one to judge others' tastes. This reassures Kirino. She also tries to make sure that what Kyosuke said is true, so she starts asking him several questions, which he answers in a way that puts her at ease. After this, Kyosuke goes to his room to finally get some sleep. In the middle of the night, Kirino wakes him up and takes him to her room to show him her entire collection of Love with Little Sister games. She also shows him other items from the same franchise like anime, magazines, and even a limited edition chest. The protagonist is amazed by the extent of her obsession with this franchise. He then asks her how she managed to afford all these things, as they seem quite expensive. Kirino confirms that they cost more than a minimum wage, but reveals that she's a teenage model for a magazine and earns money from royalties and the use of her image in that magazine. Clearly, Kyosuke had no idea that his sister was doing this, but he doesn't see it as a bad thing, as she can live her life as she pleases and spend her money on whatever she likes. Before leaving her room, he promises not to tell their parents, knowing they won't be as open-minded as he is, and offers his support in case she needs it. The prota finally leaves Kirino's room and returns to his own room to get some much-needed sleep. However, Kirino wakes him up again as she wants him to experience the Love with Little Sister games as well, seeking an objective opinion on their quality. Kyosuke is unsure about this, as it's odd for his younger sister to want to play an adult-themed game about sibling love. Upon hearing his concerns, Kirino gives him the family-friendly version of the game. Nevertheless, Kyosuke isn't in the mood to play at the moment, as he just wants to sleep. He tells Kirino they'll play during his free time in the coming week, and she agrees on the condition that he finishes the game before the next week so that he can finally get some sleep. A day passes, and we see Kirino at high school with her friends. We can notice that they exclude the group of Otaku boys, so Kirino can't help but feel bad since she can't be herself in front of her friends, which upsets her. Later, at home, Kyosuke tries to advise Kirino about what she can do regarding her otaku hobby. Because she can't be herself in front of her friends, the protagonist recommends her to find new friends who share her interests. Kirino refuses because she doesn't want her high school friends to find out that she hangs out with otaku people, as she doesn't want to lose the social normalcy her friends provide. The next day in Kyosuke's class, Manami sees him looking worried, so she asks him what's wrong. He tells her everything that's happening with his sister. In the midst of this conversation, Kyosuke comes up with a brilliant idea for Kirino to make otaku friends without her high school friends finding out. Finding otaku friends online. Kyosuke shares this idea with his sister when he returns home. At first, she's not very convinced, but she decides to take a chance and try her luck. When she enters the Otaku meeting website, she is surprised because the site's administrator is quite attentive and active, responding almost instantly with an email invitation to a girls' meeting in Akihabara with the purpose of having tea, talking, and getting to know each other. Because of this, Kirino gets very excited as it will be her first time going to Akihabara, which is the most otaku city in all of Japan. Since she doesn't want to go alone, she decides to bring her brother along to watch over her during the meeting. Days pass, and the day of the meeting arrives. Kirino was afraid to enter the cafe by herself, so she asks her brother to accompany her, but he initially refuses. However, he ends up going undercover, sitting at a table far away from Kirino and the group of otaku girls, observing everything while being attended to by a maid. Moments later, Kirino arrives with a group of otaku girls, and we can see the leader Sori Makishima, who gives orders for everyone to start having tea and talking to each other. It's clear that Kirino is having trouble starting a conversation with any of the girls, while the other girls are able to chat and get along. After the meeting, most of them go exploring the area in groups, leaving Kirino alone. She is about to leave by herself when the Proto arrives to accompany her, complimenting her on how fantastic she was at the meeting. Before they leave, Sori invites them to a new meeting, where she can get to know the girls better, including Kirino and another gothic girl. Obviously, this should be a girls-only meeting, but Sori agrees to let Kyosuke attend. Everyone accepts the invitation to the new meeting. In this second meeting, we meet the gothic girl named Ruri Gokao, who goes by Kuromeko, or Kuro. She is quite direct and honest, not hesitating to criticize the preferences of others. Within 5 minutes, she begins to criticize Sori and Kirino. Sori, as the leader of the Otaku group, remains unaffected since she's used to being criticized. On the other hand, Kirino gets upset and responds by saying that Kuro seems like someone who enjoys dark and gothic things. To Kirino's misfortune, she's right because Kuro's favorite anime uses complex language and extremely outdated costumes, making it seem like an anime for older, serious people, matching her demeanor. Kuro counters by saying it's embarrassing to enjoy colorful anime with characters who have powers and love, as those anime are only for kids. The fight about what anime is better escalates to a personal level, and our boy wants to intervene to prevent further disasters, but Sori stops him, saying that it's better for them to not get along than to be silent like in the first meeting. Later, the two girls leave the cafe and go to a store to search for merchandise from their favorite anime to prove which one is better, but they don't reach a conclusion. We can see that they get along during this time. When they return home, their father, upon seeing the clothing Kirino is wearing, gets angry and tells her not to wear that type of clothing because he doesn't like her being distracted from her studies and having bad habits. This obviously angers Kirino, and she quickly heads to her room. On the other hand, Kyosuke remains unfazed as their parents don't pay as much attention to him as they do to Kirino. After all these events, it's the early morning and the Prota is busy trying to complete the game Kirino had assigned him. After much effort, he finishes it and goes to her room to return it. When she receives the game, she quizzes her brother to see if he understood the game's story. He answers with what he understands, which satisfies Kirino. She begins to talk more about the next games he should play, but Kyosuke quickly changes the subject and asks about the Otaku girls from the meeting. Kirino responds that she's still in touch with all of them, especially Kuro, who happens to live in the same neighborhood as them. In the following days, we see how Kirino leads her double life with total normality. She is the cute girl at school, an incredible model at work, and a complete otaku on weekends. She continues to stay in touch with Kuro, and at this point, they could be considered close friends. She watched all the dark anime that Kuro likes, and now she wants Kuro to watch the anime she enjoys. For this reason, she promises to bring all of her DVDs of that anime so that Kuro can watch every single one of them. The weekend comes, and Kirino heads to Akihabara once again to meet her otaku friends. On the other hand, we have Kyosuke, who goes out with Minami to thank her for all the advice she gave him. Thanks to her advice, his sister no longer pesters him all the time, allowing him to regain his peaceful life. They each go about their days in their own way. We see that Kirino is having a great time with her otaku friends, sharing how fantastic her favorite anime is. This brings joy to the Prota as he enjoys seeing his sister happy. However, this happiness is short-lived as Kirino accidentally drops her otaku game when she returns home. Her father witnesses this, and he immediately starts telling her to get rid of the game, not wanting his daughter to become a lost cause in the family. Obviously, this deeply affects Kirino, so she doesn't think twice and leaves the house to vent her feelings about this terrible incident. Her brother follows her, trying to convince her to come back home, but she refuses. She can't stand her father belittling her interests, and besides, giving up being an otaku is not an option at this point. Otherwise, she would have done it a long time ago. In any case, Kyosuke is determined to help protect his sister's otaku interests from their parents. To achieve this, Kyosuke returns home without Kirino and asks his mother to leave him alone with his father have a serious conversation about the matter. His mother is shocked and pleased to see her son acting like a true older brother for the first time. Returning to the Prota, he talks to his father as planned and explains that there's nothing wrong with being an otaku. However, his father is skeptical, thinking that Kirino will go off the right path if she continues with these interests. Our young man explains that his father's concerns don't make sense, as Kirino has been an otaku for a long time and has still managed to be a good student with good grades and an important youth model. Furthermore, he explains that her new friends share the same interests and are perfectly normal people leading normal lives. Faced with all this, the father has no choice but to accept his daughter as the otaku she is and also accept her friends, thus ending his prejudice against otakus. While it seems like everything has ended well, there's one thing the father still cannot accept under any circumstances. He can't stand the fact that his underage daughter plays games. Because of this, Kyosuke decides to be a good brother once again and tells his father that those games belong to him, all in an effort to protect Kirino. While this works, and now Kirino is completely safe, the same cannot be said for our boy. His father is so upset to discover not only games but also magazines that he punches Kyosuke so hard that he's left knocked out. Thanks to this noble sacrifice, Kirino can continue her otaku life, and Kyosuke earns a special thank you from her, which leaves him surprised as he had never received even the slightest bit of affection from her before. Days later, we see that the protagonist made progress in several of the games his sister gave him, but he didn't manage to finish any of them. This frustrates Kirino a lot because she would have loved for her brother to be able to unlock the online mode in some of the games, which can only be done once the game is completed at least once. For this reason, Kirino sends Kyosuke go to his room and pressure him to complete at least one game while asking him not to interrupt the meeting she will have with her friends in a few minutes. Frustrated, our guy goes to his room to play as his sister requested, and when he's about to start playing, he realizes he can use Kirino's account. He plans to improve in the game and humiliate his sister in revenge. Sori, who was with him at that moment, is pleased to see that the prota cares so much about his little sister, so she decides to help him practice. Hours pass, and our guy gets tired of playing. He leaves his room and goes down to the living room to relax for a while. Just at that moment, Kirino's friends arrive, and he becomes somewhat entranced by them since they are all very attractive. Kirino notices this and gets so upset that she sends him back to his room. However, what Kirino didn't know is that, thanks to this, her brother can overhear all their conversations. In one of these conversations, Kirino's friend named Kanako Kurusu can't stop saying negative things about our guy. Due to this, Kyosuke prefers to return to the living room and stay there since he doesn't want to hear his friends talking badly about him. Just then, a package addressed to Kirino arrives, wrapped in a cosmetic box, and Sori is revealed to be the sender. Kirino is right there and decides to take the box while scolding her brother for being so bothersome when she's with her friends. Our guy has no problem with her keeping the box since it's not his to begin with. However, Sori calls him to ask if Kirino has received the doujinshi she sent. This is when our boy realizes that the things Sori sent to Kirino are otaku related. He rushes to his sister to take the box and prevent her non-otaku friends from discovering that Kirino is an otaku. Despite Kyosuke's pleas, Kirino refuses to give up the box, leading to a chase around the house. During this pursuit, either accidentally or intentionally, the prota ends up on top of Kirino and touches one of her balloons. As a result, Kyosuke is kicked out of the house until her friends leave. However, another one of Kirino's friends, Aya's Aragaki, realizes that Kyosuke only wanted to protect her. She asks him not to be mad at her sister for her behavior and advises him to keep looking out for her. The prota is surprised by Ayasa's kindness, and they even exchange phone numbers. He realizes that not all of Kirino's friends are judgmental. After this, with no time to lose, Kyosuke goes to explain to his sister the reason he took the box. She won't listen and she won't forgive him. Kirino will only consider forgiving him if he takes her somewhere she can't go with her friends as compensation for taking the box. Our boy can't think of a place, so he turns to Sori, and they end up going to Comiket to buy doujinshi. Despite Kirino's constant complaints, Kyosuke knows she wants to be there. Otherwise, she would have left a long time ago. However, the constant complaints annoy Kuro and everyone around them. After waiting for several hours to enter the event, Kirino gets so excited that she's almost bursting with happiness, but her reserved side keeps her from openly expressing herself. They go to a place to eat, and after that, Kirino goes to find a unique disc from one of her favorite doujinshi. To her surprise, it's already sold out, but luckily there's one copy left. To obtain it, they have to win a fighting game, and the staff member guarding the game is incredibly skilled. Initially, Sori is winning, but she's quickly defeated. Everything seems lost, but to everyone's relief, Kuro turns out to be quite good at these fighting games, and she manages to win the CD and gives it to Kirino as a friendly gesture. At first, Kirino refuses to accept it, but she eventually does. After all this, the group leaves the event very happy. However, an unexpected and unfortunate encounter occurs as they run into one of Kirino's non-otaku friends, Ayase. Kirino tries to keep her secret hidden and even ignores Sori and Kuro to achieve this. However, Ayase is very good at detecting lies in her, which leads to her becoming aggressive and demanding that Kirino reveal what she is hiding. As a result, a small struggle ensues, causing Kirino's belongings to fall. The situation infuriates Ayase, who is shocked to discover her best friend's interests. She asks Kirino never to speak to her again. The protagonist asks his friends not to take it badly, but Sori and Kuro understand the situation. Now their main concern is Kirino, as they don't know how this revelation will affect her. The next day, Kirino attends the athletics championship as if nothing had happened. However, as the days go by, she realizes that her sister is acting strangely, leading her to ask if she has made amends with Ayase. Kirino tries to avoid the topic, but the protagonist is persistent. Finally, she loses control and hits him as a way to release her frustration, since she wants to reconcile with Ayase but finds it difficult. It is at this moment that Kyosuke takes the initiative and calls Ayase to try to convince her that her sister's secret hobby is not so bad. However, Ayase refuses to accept that her best friend is an otaku and asks her to stop being one, arguing that otakus are being associated with future criminals due to a case that attempted to replicate an anime scene in a crime. The protagonist lacks strong arguments to refute this, so he decides to investigate and goes to his father, who is a cultured person. He mentions that a friend of his discovered his interest in adult games for young girls, which infuriates his father but still helps him restore his reputation. With solid arguments, Kyosuke approaches Ayame and tells her that the report is true, but they later retract it. He explains that the second article didn't have as much impact since it didn't sell as much as the claim that otakus were criminals, and the writer himself apologized for linking otakus to a crime with no real connection. Ayane is left speechless, but she still can't accept her friend's affinity for anime, feeling that Kirino is prioritizing it over their friendship. Then Kirino herself intervenes to fight for their friendship, since both her friendship and her love for anime are equally important in her life. Ayane realizes that Kirino is telling the truth but still struggles to accept it. It's at this moment that Kyosuke gives her the final push by saying that it was thanks to anime that he discovered the love he feels for his younger sister, which causes great embarrassment in Ayane and awakens her protective instinct toward Kirino. Finally, she decides to become her best friend again to keep her away from Kyosuke. Thanks to this conversation, their friendship is reestablished, and Kirino shows her gratitude in a cold manner, inviting Kyosuke to play a few rounds of the young girl's fighting game. Days later, a friend of the protagonist asks about his relationship with Minami, since they seem very close, sometimes even like they're a couple. However, the protagonist clarifies that it's nothing like that. They're childhood friends, and their bond is more like that of a relationship with the wise grandmother. Although he's a little annoyed at the suggestion that he might be dating a guy, his friend continues to think there's something more romantic between them than just a childhood friendship. Later, the protagonist accompanies Minami to her home to see the Halloween decoration they're planning for a Japanese candy store. Upon arrival, they find Minami's grandfather sitting at the table, seemingly lifeless, which leads them to think he's dead. However, it turns out he was just playing a prank by pretending to be a zombie to scare them. The protagonist is annoyed by the joke, but then another old friend of Kyosuke named Iwa arrives, who had shaved his head completely in an attempt to look like a rocker, but ended up looking like a monk due to a poorly executed shaving technique. Later, Minami keeps her promise and shows the candy she had mentioned. The protagonist is pleasantly surprised by how delicious they are, noticing an improvement in quality since the last time he tried them. The grandfather gets impatient due to the sweetness of the situation and suggests that Minami should go to her room so the teenagers can have some privacy. However, this suggestion only fuels the grandparents' imaginations, as two teenagers alone in a room often lead to misunderstandings. Minami is nervous when she hears Kyosuke say he wants to go to bed, but she soon realizes he means sleeping, as he's exhausted from the recent events. Despite this, when she learns that there are still preparations to be done for the Halloween decoration, she is encouraged to help, and Minami thanks him, promising him a plate of food for dinner. After hard work on the decoration, Minami offers the protagonist to stay overnight, just like in the old days, informs his family, and waits his turn for the shower. However, both he and Minami want to be the last to shower, which leads Minami to try to tease him by saying it would be better to shower together. Despite her attempt at flirting, the protagonist is not intimidated and explains that they need to be responsible. The grandparents also support the idea of showering together, but the protagonist decides to put an end to the joke, as it could become too real. After taking their showers, the grandparents continue trying to bring the two young people together and decide to connect their feudants so that they have no choice but to sleep together. Instead of making it complicated, they decide to sleep as they did when they were kids. However, after spending a whole day with Minami, the protagonist becomes curious about what she would do if a guy confessed his feelings to her. Minami admits that she doesn't know and asks him the same question. The protagonist is honest and tells her that he would reject such a confession because it would change the peaceful life he's leading. Minami shares the same sentiment and is content with their current relationship. However, Kirino, the protagonist's younger sister, is not as happy, as she's been upset all day due to his absence. A couple of days later, the protagonist arrives home and is surprised to find Kuro in his living room. She explains that she came to watch anime since she didn't like the first episodes of Kirino's favorite anime, and Sori proposed a group anime viewing to get different perspectives on the series. However, Kirino locked herself in her room, and Sori couldn't join due to an unexpected issue. The protagonist senses that the reason Kirino locked herself in her room instead of watching anime on the big screen is probably that she got an argument with Kuro. Kuro tells him that she got angry with Kirino for reading the novel she's writing because she considers it too basic, with dialogue full of onomatopoeias that detract from the quality of the storytelling. What bothered her even more is that Kirino created a young character clearly inspired by her and gave her a tragic ending, which she finds unacceptable. Kyosuke agrees that Kirino went overboard, but Sori asks him to intervene to prevent the anime viewing from falling apart. Kyosuke goes to talk to his sister and tries to convince her to come down and join the anime viewing. However, she is also upset about the novel that Kuro is writing. She had to read an encyclopedia to understand the complex words Kuro used, and she created a character based on her that leads a terrible life. Kyosuke changes sides and starts supporting his sister, but he realizes that they both did the same thing. Finally, he convinces Kirino to come downstairs, arguing that Kuro doesn't want to waste time, and it would be better to finish what they came to do. The anime viewing begins after overcoming many obstacles, and although fights between the two girls are inevitable, it doesn't mean their friendship is in danger since it's their way of showing how good friends they are. Days later, Kyosuke is confronted by Kirino for watching content on his laptop. Kyosuke has no choice but to confess his guilt, so Kirino forces him to help her with the new novel she's writing. It turns out that after Kuro read her novel, she decided to write one based solely on her tastes and published it on a website. Soon, she received a message from an editor interested in publishing her work. Kyosuke is surprised to learn that Kuro is about to become a professional author thanks to her passion for little sisters, although she has her professional pride and wants to leave her current work as her main job to start a completely new one. But for that, she needs to conduct research, and that's where Kyosuke comes in. Unfortunately, Kirino's requests for research are impossible to fulfill, including things like letting a car hit him to experience the fear of dying or buying her expensive gifts. Kyosuke gets tired of these demands and tells her that it doesn't make sense to do research for a self-centered work seeking self-indulgence. This angers Kirino, who, to prove the importance of her work, pours a bucket of water on herself, wishing to experience a situation where she needs her boyfriend's help in a place where no one else will help her. After drying off at a hotel, Kyosuke asks Kirino if it was really worth ruining Christmas with her supposed research. Seeing the smile on Kirino's face, the protagonist realizes that for her, every second spent was worth it. After several weeks, Kirino's novel becomes a complete success, leading to rumors of a possible anime adaptation. This excites Kirino very much, and nervously, she decides to invite Kuro and Sori to her first meeting with the producer in charge of bringing her novel to the screen. Sori gladly accepts the invitation, while Kuro does so with her typical cold attitude. In the meeting, Kirino's nerves quickly disappear as she begins to present all the ideas she had prepared. Although the producers listen to her, they face obstacles as time and budget constraints do not allow for all the modifications Kirino desires. Furthermore, they propose changing the protagonist to a male so that the audience can relate better, arguing that there is no logical reason for the main character to be a woman. This deeply discourages Kirino. Kyosuke notices that something is wrong after the meeting and decides to ask his friends. They are not surprised that Kirino has been affected because, in the end, all the ideas she proposed were modified. Sori points out that the time slot for airing Kirino's anime will replace a cancelled series, suggesting that they are just trying to fill a slot without much effort. Both Kyosuke and the girls decide to intervene and agree to a meeting with the representative and the producers. Kyosuke acts as Kirino's representative due to their sibling relationship, even though they are not as close as they appear. Kyosuke starts by proposing a significant change, keeping the protagonist as a woman as he believes it's crucial for Kirino, even if there is no logical reason for it. One of the producers agrees that the connection with the audience is partly due to the female protagonist. However, the meeting veers off in a way that they end up modifying the novel's story to the extent that it looks more like a spin-off than a faithful adaptation. Kyosuke gets tired of hearing so many modifications that make the work more conventional and boring. Kuro, as a writer, understands how Kirino feels when she sees her work, which took so much effort and passion being altered. She also notices some of the producers' envy towards the story, as Kirino's work has achieved a level of success that none of their own works could match in terms of sales. Kyosuke experiences a certain pleasure in seeing his seemingly perfect sister facing problems for the first time in her life, but he can't allow them to ruin the work in which Kirino has invested so much. He pleads with them to seriously consider Kirino's ideas because he knows she's giving her best to make her proposals the best they can be. Finally, the producers agree to make a real effort in the production. Kuro wonders why Kyosuke is trying so hard, to which he simply replies that he does it because Kirino is his little sister. Days later, Kirino becomes even more capricious because her demands in the production have been accepted. Her growing fame makes her want to keep Kyosuke away, so she informs him that the next time he helps her will be the last. While waiting for that day to arrive, Kirino eagerly anticipates her new game, which she had been waiting for weeks. Without wasting a second, she immerses herself in the game immediately. On the other hand, Kuro spends a day at home after a long time and realizes that it's not a bad idea to take care of her siblings from time to time. In another context, Ayane works as a responsible person and tries to contact Kirino to find out what she's doing, but her phone is off, so she assumes Kirino is studying and doesn't want to distract her. In reality, Kirino is having an argument with a girl for being too cold, which is ironically similar to her own personality, but she doesn't realize it. Frustrated, Ayan decides to change her approach in the game, focusing on the younger sister who is kinder, and she is satisfied every time this character shows her affection and gratitude for being a good older sister. However, this character even tries to improve the relationship with the cold sister, which irritates Kirino as she has to deal with the situation somehow. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Sori actually comes from a wealthy family, and due to her tall stature, she has to custom order the cosplays she wears. Despite her social status, she continues to enjoy her otaku passion and is excited to see how the made costumes she has ordered for her dear friends will turn out. Returning to Kirino, the noises she makes while playing are so loud that they prevent the protagonist from concentrating on his studies. Finally, he calls Kuro to get some distraction. Kuro is initially annoyed at being just a distraction, but upon hearing Kirino's screams, she feels sorry for her brother for having to endure such a noisy sister every day. After a long effort, Kirino manages to get the cold sister character to show her sensitive side and surrender to her in the game. She then heads for a shower to get ready. In the process, she crosses paths with Kyosuke and drops her underwear, leading to a very embarrassing moment. Despite that, Kirino doesn't let anything ruin her big moment in the adult game. Although the scene is so graphic that Kyosuke gets tired of hearing her scream so loudly and scolds her to lower her voice. Of course, Kirino becomes furious just for being interrupted at the climax of the adult game. However, after completing the game's route, she experiences a kind of emotional letdown since the 2D sister character, with an identical personality to hers, separates from her and confesses her love for her brother. Somehow, this ending of the 2D sister, with a personality identical to her own, bothers her a lot, and Kyosuke is the one who ends up having a hard time due to her sister's bad mood. Nevertheless, Kyosuke continues to treat her with affection because, after all, she's his sister. Days later, Ayase calls Kyosuke, seeking his help to choose a gift for Kirino. Kyosuke doesn't see the need to recommend anything since he believes any gift from her best friend will be good enough. However, Ayase wishes to give her something related to her hobby, so she needs advice to make sure Kirino will like it. Kyosuke agrees to help and approaches Kirino to find out her preferences. But in his attempt, he receives contempt from his sister, who has found out that he has been meeting with her friends, which makes her jealous, although she's not sure if it's jealousy toward her friends or toward her older brother. Kyosuke meets with Sori and Kuro to find a gift that Kirino might like. The task becomes complicated because the gift cannot be indecent, as Ayase would disapprove. Sori suggests vending machine figures since they are relatively exclusive and not available in stores, but Kyosuke thinks they could find something better and continues their search. Finally, they come across a character from her favorite anime of which there is only one copy in the world, but with the small inconvenience that it is the prize of a cosplay contest. Ayase reacts negatively to the idea of participating in the contest, especially when they show her the costume she must wear, as it shows a lot of skin. Kyosuke explains to her that, as a professional model, winning the contest where looking good is the challenge, but she also has to resemble the character, which leads her to accept the idea of having someone else participate on her behalf. On the day of the contest, Kyosuke disguises himself as an agent and presents Kanako Kurusu to portray Maruru, the protagonist of the anime. Although he is surprised to see her dressed, as she is the spitting image of Maruru, her attitude leaves much to be desired. Ayase decides to strip her completely so she has no choice but to help her in the cosplay contest. Kanako agrees to win, although not very happily. Now they just have to wait, but Kirino attends the cosplay contest, so Ayase separates from Kyosuke and sends him to keep Kirino distracted. Kirino doesn't understand the situation very well, but allows them to hide her so she can continue watching the presentation in peace. She is surprised to discover that one of her acquaintances will participate in the cosplay contest. The contest begins, and the former winner proves to be incredibly good, being the spitting image of her character. However, Kanako not only resembles the character, but also performs an excellent dance and sings the anime's opening, which earns her a perfect score and allows her to win the prize without much effort. Kyosuke is surprised to see how cheerfully she sings the opening song, and Kanako explains that she has auditioned for idols, making it easy for her to memorize anime songs. Besides, she loves the fans' adoration, which makes Kyosuke see a future for her as an idol. Thanks to his help, they manage to find the perfect gift for Kirino. The next day, Kyosuke's mother informs him that she won't be home for several days, so he decides to do some shopping to survive. While he is at the supermarket, he runs into Manami and suggests that she come to his house to cook together. Manami happily agrees, eager to spend time with him. However, the news doesn't sit well with Kirino, who feels jealous of her cold sister and accuses Kyosuke of being ill for bringing a girl home when their parents aren't there. Kyosuke tries to calm Kirino by explaining that she only came to cook, but she is not willing to listen to reason. Manami intervenes to prevent an argument and assures that she is not there for anything inappropriate. Reluctantly, Kirino allows Manami to spend the afternoon in their house, but warns Kyosuke that she will get revenge for this. Kyosuke doesn't pay much attention to Kirino's threats as he doesn't believe he did anything wrong. At first, it seems like the situation is settling down, but when Manami enters Kirino's room, she finds her laptop open to an game with a sister theme, and some magazines with girls wearing glasses scattered on the bed. It turns out that it was all a trap set by Kirino, but Manami's reaction is much more unexpected than Kyosuke could have imagined. Instead of judging him as ill, Manami decides to accept his fetishes and calls him Oni-chan. This situation deeply depressed Kyosuke, but then he is invited to a party at a hotel by the girls. However, upon arrival, he is greatly surprised to find that they are all dressed as maids. Kirino, in particular, is uncomfortable in this outfit because it involves acting submissively to her master, which is one of the things she hates the most. Kuro takes the opportunity to tease her by sticking to Kyosuke, clearly provoking jealousy in Kirino. She accuses Kyosuke of being weird, which makes him explode since he has endured a lot of mistreatment without apparent reason. However, the hotel party has a purpose: to thank Kyosuke for all his support. Kirino acknowledges that thanks to him, her father didn't take her manga away. She was able to reconcile with Ayase and make new otaku friends, which has been crucial to her happiness. For all this, Kirino has prepared a special gift for him. Kyosuke opens it excitedly and discovers that it's a game with his sister theme, with a character representing Kirino. Despite it not being his preference, Kyosuke accepts the gift with gratitude, understanding how important it is to his sister. Days go by, and Kyosuke is surprised to notice that Kirino is acting unusually kind, which begins to catch his attention and concern. Manami thinks that Kyosuke is exaggerating and that Kirino is simply showing kindness, but he still has doubts and decides to ask Ayase if she knows if anything happened to Kirino. Ayase has not noticed any significant change in Kirino's behavior, which surprises Kyosuke, since he expected his best friend to have noticed. With no answers in sight, Kyosuke asks Sori if she knows anything, but she also has no information about what is happening to Kirino, although she admits that she has noticed her being more active lately. In the evening, Kirino enters her brother's room to ask him to fulfill the last task she had mentioned earlier, promising to leave him alone after that. Kyosuke agrees and goes out to buy the game in the middle of the night so that Kirino can play it as soon as possible. However, he encounters his friend, who apparently was going to cover for him with their parents, but what really concerns him is why his friend is interested in a first edition of a game. Kyosuke also has personal reasons not to want to reveal his interest in the game, so they both act as if nothing had happened, although Kyosuke cannot help but notice that his friend is interested in an adult game with homoerotic content, which surpasses the limits of his tolerance. Kyosuke's friend is not interested in these types of games by choice, but because his little sister is a fujoshi, which means she likes content that shows men having close relationships with other men. As a good brother, he tries to support his sister's interests as much as he can. Kyosuke understands the situation and decides not to ask any further questions about it, continuing his way home with the game in hand. However, Kirino is not finished with her request, as she also wants him to play the first route of the game with her. Despite his reservations, Kyosuke fulfills her request, but she insists on showing him something she didn't see the first time she explored her secret interests. To Kyosuke's surprise, Kirino takes out a seemingly ordinary box, but he feels more embarrassed than ever. Finally, Kyosuke takes the album from Kirino's hands and discovers a plane ticket with a date for America for the same day. It turns out that her company has offered her the opportunity to study abroad as part of her preparation as a model, and she's been secretly preparing for this trip. Kirino wants to know her brother's opinion on this decision. Kyosuke, surprised and somewhat apathetic, responds that she should do what she wants. However, his seemingly indifferent response infuriates Kirino. In a twist of fate, the accidental drop of a laptop causes the game to play a scene in which the brother asks his sister to stay by his side, regardless of any future sacrifices. Kirino interprets this as a sign that Kyosuke wants her to stay, but Kyosuke is not the kind of brother who would put his selfishness above his sister's decisions. Furious, Kirino beats him until he passes out. The next day, Kyosuke wakes up bruised and weakened. He thinks that Kirino has finally left, but to his surprise, she has decided to stay. This pleases their parents and Kyosuke, even though he doesn't show it easily. Kirino informs him that the favors she owes Kyosuke are not yet finished, which would typically be bad news. However, after facing the real possibility of losing her for a long time, Kyosuke is relieved and looks forward to spending more time with his sister. Chapter 13, Alternative, True Route. Asterisk from this chapter to chapter 15 of this season, an alternative storyline with different events is presented, which can be considered as another ending or not, depending on people's preferences. The chapter begins similarly to the previous one, with the protagonist waking up and being surprised to see that Kirino is acting unusually kind, which starts to catch his attention and concern. Manami thinks that Kyosuke is exaggerating and that Kirino just wants to be kind, but he has many doubts about it. When he meets Ayase, Kyosuke asks her if something happened to Kirino because, as her best friend, Ayase should have noticed any significant change in her behavior. However, Ayase has not noticed anything unusual in Kirino, even though she has seen her being more active lately. In the evening, Kirino enters her brother's room to ask him to fulfill the last task she had mentioned earlier, promising to leave him in peace forever after that. Kyosuke agrees and goes out to buy the game in the middle of the night so that Kirino can play it as soon as possible. However, he has the misfortune to run into his friend who was supposed to cover for him with their parents, and he realizes that he is buying a first edition of the games. Our protagonist also has personal reasons for not wanting to reveal his interest in the game, so both act as if nothing had happened. Kyosuke cannot help but notice that his friend is interested in a game with homoerotic themes, which exceeds his tolerance up to that point. However, he understands that his friend does it for his sister, who is a fujoshi and enjoys content related to close relationships between men, which leads the friend to support his sister's interests as best he can. Kyosuke fully understands the situation and after buying the game, tries to return home. However, the train station is already closed, so he asks a stranger to lend him their bicycle. Surprisingly, the person agrees, believing that players of games are trustworthy individuals. After pedaling for several hours back home, Kyosuke finally arrives. After taking a bath, he receives an unusual invitation from Kirino to play a bit of the game together because she wants to show him something she didn't show him the first time she explored her interests. Although Kyosuke feels some apprehension about what he is about to witness, he accepts and plays with Kirino. The next day, Kyosuke receives a surprise as he understands why the task from the previous night was the last. It turns out that Kirino has gone to America for training and to pursue a future related to sports, and the only person who was not aware of this trip was Kyosuke. Although he is surprised, he is happy for her and continues his life with the satisfaction that his sister has gone to chase her dreams. Weeks pass and a new school year begins. The big surprise for Kyosuke is that Kuro starts studying at his school, which fills his heart with joy as he's called senpai by a young girl for the first time in his life. With Kirino's absence, Sori and Kuro feel that Kyosuke must be lonely, so they decide to visit his house to keep him company, albeit without the commotion Kirino used to bring. Kyosuke, recalling the feeling of being called senpai, tries to get close to Kuro again. However, he realizes that Kuro is very lonely and avoids everyone who tries to make plans with her. Manami and Kyosuke apologize to those who tried to talk to Kuro and calm the situation, stating that they already have plans with her. Kyosuke decides to take Kuro to see school clubs in search of friends with common interests. The only club that catches Kuro's attention is the video game club, but her character makes her accidentally insult a kind member named Makabe. As time goes by, Kyosuke notices that Kuro isn't making friends and is always alone, which worries him more and more. Story convinces Kuro to try joining a club with Kyosuke, so they visit the video game club again. Kyosuke realizes that the club president Miura is the same person who lent him a bicycle when he fulfilled Kirino's last favor. Kuro finds game development interesting and decides to join the club to make good use of her time. Kyosuke is glad to hear this, but aside from the club, Kuro continues to distance herself from her fellow students. She tries to help her with cleaning tasks that she does alone to avoid socializing, which annoys her because she feels that Kyosuke is redirecting his older brother's protective instinct toward her, now that Kirino is no longer around. Sori asks Kyosuke to understand Kuro, arguing that with all the responsibilities she has at home, she may have been rejected by her peers, causing her to distrust people. However, Kyosuke has no intention of giving up on Kuro, so he accompanies her to the video game club's welcome party. There they meet a girl named Makaji Sina, which surprises Kyosuke, due to her last name being the same as Kirino's friend. Kyosuke inquires about the reason Sena joined the club and her opinion about otakus. Sena candidly confesses that she wants to be a video game designer, but has a negative opinion of otakus, whom she considers people who can be easily ignored until their eccentric behaviors affect others. Kuro gets a little upset when she hears this, so she sets a trap to expose Sena as an otaku. Sena falls into the trap, revealing that she's a fujoshi and otaku enthusiast, but in a different way, as she's the sibling of Kyosuke's friend. Finally, Sena's confession about her 3D wet dreams involving Makabe causes an awkward and humorous moment. Makabe faints and Sena goes into shock for having hurt her 3D platonic love. Kyosuke calls his brother to help him calm Sena down, and eventually, he succeeds. After the incident, Kyosuke confesses to Kuro that he feels lonely due to Kirino's absence, but he assures her that's not the reason he wants to help, and Kuro accepts his help, though with a bit of reluctance to maintain her cold attitude. Days later, the club assigns the task to create a game together to the new members to improve their teamwork skills. However, differences of opinion arise due to the divergent ideas of both groups. To resolve this, they decide to prepare demos of their projects and then choose which one to develop for a video game contest. Kyosuke joins the development team as a new member and decides to research programming at the library. This surprises Sena, who thought he was just meddling. At home, Kyosuke has an epiphany and shares his plan the next day. He proposes making a game as this category has few participants and it's a field he feels more comfortable in, given his experience. However, both Sena and Kuro strongly reject the idea of making a game and consider it strange for even proposing it. The next day, Sena and Kuro present their projects, while Kyosuke's is rejected from the start. Sina proposes a simple RPG with a well-designed leveling system, backed by a playable demo and basic scenarios. Kuro, on the other hand, presents an extensive narrative similar to a visual novel in the style of Steins Gate, but with complex themes. Sina criticizes the repetitiveness of the story and the abundance of difficult words, but Kuro refuses to change her style and defends the idea of creating works that satisfy her personally. Sina admits that this is the right attitude, but points out that Kuro's project will be too big to complete on time. Kyosuke asks Sina to let Kuro finish her project, as Kuro has probably considered this challenge. Kuro is willing to work tirelessly, as she is very productive in both writing and drawing. Finally, the club votes for Kuro's project, which enrages Sina. Miura explains that initially they were going to vote for Sina's project until they saw themed scenes inspired by the club members in Kyosuke's demo. Terrified, everyone opts for Kuro's project, and Sina, reluctantly, accepts the majority's decision, ceasing to attend the club. Kyosuke realizes that the purpose of joining the club has been lost, as only he and Kuro are working together. However, Kuro is content with this situation, as she can be alone with her older brother. Kyosuke asks her to call him Senpai in public, but she will continue to call him Oni-chan in private to tease him. After some time, Kyosuke notices several errors in the game, and the club realizes that it resembles the cyberpunk genre, requiring the correction of numerous mistakes. Kuro decides to seek Sina's help, as she sees that her game has clean code, and she pleads with her to work with her. Sina agrees, and together they form a successful team. As Kuro writes quickly, Sina fixes errors at high speed, and Kyosuke tests the game and provides feedback. The game is released to the market but receives harsh criticism for its script. Sina is very upset because users have created a blog just to make fun of the game, and she can't stand so much criticism. She decides to confront her detractors, but Kuro suggests a better solution: create a game so good that it silences everyone. Thanks to this, Kuro becomes friends with Sina, and they spend a lot of time together. However, Kirino sends a message to Kuro asking her to get rid of her anime collection. Kyosuke is surprised to hear this and calls Ayase to inquire about Kirino's strange request. Ayase knows nothing about it and hasn't had any contact with Kirino since she left, which frustrates her. Although she doesn't know how Kirino is doing, Ayase is sure that if Kirino communicates with anyone, it will be Kyosuke. She asks him to be willing to do whatever it takes to ensure Kirino's safety. Kyosuke then goes to see Kuro, who had also called him. However, upon arrival, he forgets what he was going to tell her when he sees Kuro's distressed expression. Kyosuke tells her about Kirino's requests, and Kuro seems to know where her sister is and how to reach her. Kyosuke realizes that the only way to be at ease is to go find Kirino, so he motivates himself to do so. Kuro thanks Kyosuke for his unwavering support, and although she disguises it as a curse, she thanks him with a kiss on the cheek to make sure he doesn't back down. Upon returning home, his father is determined to go see Kirino because of the strange message he received. His wife doesn't let him go because he has many responsibilities, so Kyosuke offers to go in his place. Upon arrival, he persuades Kirino to accompany him to play the game she gave him. Kyosuke confesses that everyone is worried about her because of the unusual message she sent. Kirino explains that the message means exactly what she wrote. She feels that all the things she left behind are holding her back, and if she doesn't get rid of them, she will unconsciously limit herself. Kyosuke doesn't understand, and Kirino reveals that when she arrived in the United States, she promised herself that she wouldn't talk to relatives or friends until she defeated another athlete. But at her current level, she hasn't been able to beat anyone, which embarrasses her. That's why she didn't explain to anyone the reason for her silence. Kyosuke realizes that Kirino is not happy in the United States and asks her to return to Japan with him. Kirino initially refuses, but Kyosuke insists. He tells her that she doesn't have to be perfect at everything, that she just needs to be a normal sister with friends and hobbies. The main reason he wants her to come back is that he misses her a lot, and the house feels empty without her, even though she often belittles him. Finally, Kirino agrees to return to Japan, but before that, she tries one last time and succeeds. Upon returning to Japan, she boasts of her victory to Kuro, who admits that the victory was legitimate. From that moment on, Kirino returns to her normal life as a devoted Maruru fan, which makes her happy. Season 2. Days later, it's about to be a year since Kyosuke learned Kirino's secret, but now that she's returned to her previous attitude, she treats him like a brother who knows nothing about it. Manami notices that something is bothering the protagonist, so she advises him to stay true to himself, and things will sort themselves out because he's a great person. Kyosuke is relieved to hear his wise friend's optimism, but the other problem that concerns him is something he can't share with her, so he decides to keep it to himself. In the club, Kyosuke attempts to talk to Kuro, but the atmosphere is very uncomfortable. He struggles to ask her about the meaning of the kiss she gave him before going to rescue Kirino. Kuro becomes very nervous and tries to gather her thoughts, but Sina interrupts them and Kuro decides not to speak after this brief moment when she was willing to open up. With all these unresolved problems, Kyosuke withdraws a bit to reflect on things. In the club, issues start arising because there's no one to control Sina from turning any normal scene in their games into a yaoi fantasy. Kyosuke, on the other hand, keeps himself and by chance goes to the kitchen at the same time as Kirino. He takes the opportunity to ask her if the favors have truly ended, and she doesn't confirm his freedom, giving him a glimmer of hope. As he expected, the next day, Kirino wakes him up with a tug to ask for his support once again because she needs to catch up on all the things she couldn't buy while she was in the United States. They embark on a tour of Akihabara to purchase all sorts of Maruru merchandise. Kyosuke wonders why Kirino didn't buy these things online, and she confirms that she indeed bought many things online. However, there were so many of them that it didn't seem like she had reduced the list with her online purchases. As a token of appreciation for his support, Kirino lends him a game she just bought. Kyosuke is delighted to see this as her way of thanking him. However, his joy quickly fades when Kirino starts screaming with excitement upon seeing her favorite characters in the game. Days later, Ayase visits Kyosuke and desperately asks for his help because Kirino has been acting strangely. Lately, Kirino has been receiving messages on her phone that make her smile, and when Ayase inquires about them, Kirino just replies that they are messages from her otaku friends. However, Ayase doesn't believe this obvious answer and is sure that something else is going on. Therefore, Kyosuke decides to assist Ayase and investigate what's happening. Kyosuke infiltrates Kirino's room under the pretense of wanting to play the same game as her, which excites Kirino a lot. She shows him her new acquisition, an extremely realistic game that allows interaction with the character, which responds in real time through the microphone. Kyosuke advises Kirino not to neglect her friendships because of the game, reminding her that in the past she said they were just as important as adult games. Kirino is aware that she's been neglecting her friends, so she decides to leave the game with Kyosuke to avoid the temptation of playing and at the same time find someone to talk to about the game. Kyosuke accepts taking the game, thinking it's the best way to bring Kirino back to reality. However, the game turns out to be highly addictive and turns Kyosuke into someone who tells Kirino that he loves her. Manami discovers this and gets angry seeing that he has no intention of quitting the game. She then informs Ayase about Kyosuke's attitude, and the latter calls him to reprimand him for playing instead of helping her get Kirino back. Kyosuke tries to save himself by saying that it's all part of his plan, as the best way to get Kirino out of her addiction is to understand the game that keeps her trapped. After much investigation, he concludes that it's easier to become the game character in real life than to make Kirino overcome the game. Interestingly, Ayase is very similar to the game character, so all he has to do is behave like the character to win Kirino back. Ayase initially considers the idea, but after a while she is overcome with embarrassment and accuses Kyosuke of being ill for making her say such embarrassing things. Ayase decides to run away with Manami to tell her about Kyosuke's reprehensible behavior. She also takes Kirino's handheld console with her, but Manami doesn't agree with the idea of destroying it since it doesn't belong to her. Therefore, they decide to go with Plan B. The next day, Manami shows up to pick up Kyosuke, but she acts strangely and even repulsed, trying to imitate the game character. Kyosuke finds this highly amusing because they have finally resorted to his idea. However, Ayase made a small mistake and followed the Yandere route, using dialogues intended to defeat anyone who stands in the way of her love for Kirino, in this case, Kyosuke. Fortunately, Kirino doesn't hate Kyosuke enough to want to defeat him, but she finds his behavior very repulsive. Ayase breaks down in tears upon hearing that everything she did only worsened Kirino's perception of her. Several weeks later, Sori's birthday arrives and Kyosuke, along with the girls, goes to her apartment to surprise her. However, they forgot to ask for her apartment number, so they couldn't get in. While they discussed whose fault it is, Sori sees them arriving, surprising everyone as she is not in her usual otaku appearance. It turns out that Sori wasn't always the otaku girl they know. Not too long ago, she was a shy girl who never left her house due to her physical weakness. However, her sister named Kaori pulled her out of that situation almost overnight because she stopped doing dangerous things and decided to organize a fun group in one of her apartments. At first, Sori couldn't even look her sister's friends in the eye, but she met Kaneda, a rising artist, an extreme otaku, and an extrovert. Kaneda showed her everything she knew about the world of otaku, and gradually, Sori became more comfortable in the group thanks to her friendship with Kaneda. However, even though it was Kaori who introduced her to the group, her relationship with her sister did not improve at all. After some time, Kaori informed everyone that she would leave the group because she was getting married and moving abroad. Sori thought this wouldn't affect the group too much, but Kaori had always been the glue that held the group together. One by one, they all drifted away, leaving her alone once again. Sori was very angry and went to see her sister to blame her for destroying the group, but Kaori had nothing to apologize for. After all, the group was Kaori's idea in the first place, and it wasn't her fault that her sister couldn't make friends on her own. Because of this, Sori returned home upset and decided to form an even more fun group than the previous one, but she didn't know where to start. Just then, her teacher, Kaneda, arrived at her apartment to drop off a spare key. Sori collapsed at her feet, unsure of what to do. Kaneda told her that she knew what was going on because when she first arrived, she said she wanted to form a new group. Although Kaneda couldn't be a part of it due to her debut as a manga artist, she handed over her magical glasses, which would allow Sori to take on a new personality to achieve her goal. That's how Sori became an outgoing otaku and organized the meetings with the goal of assembling the new dream team she desired. She could now proudly tell their sister, who came to visit, that she had her own group and was planning to have a great time with them on her birthday. Kaori was delighted to see that she no longer needed to be taken care of like the girl she had introduced to her group, so she left with her friends to another place, leaving Sori alone to have fun. Kaneda was also pleased to see how much she had grown, not just in height, and left her with a gift that Kaori had brought for her, demonstrating her concern for Sori. Thus, Sori enjoyed her time with her friends, knowing that everything was fine with her beloved sister. Days later, Kyushu gets a big surprise when he arrives home to find a young girl with clothes on. Due to the rush, Kirino tries to cover her up, but accidentally drops her robe too, and our protagonist pays the consequences for being in the wrong place. The young woman introduces herself as Ria, Kirino's former roommate, who decided to visit Japan and stay at Kyusuke's house during her vacation. Kyusuke is frustrated at being displaced by these circumstances, although Ria is not interested in fighting. Her outgoing and affectionate personality attracts Kirino and her family, including Kirino's parents. Since they are on vacation, Ria expresses her desire to go sightseeing, and Kirino decides to take her to Akihabara, which is famous overseas. Kyusuke is surprised at her choice, as Japan has numerous tourist spots. However, Kirino prefers to limit the experience to anime stores, figurines, and gashapons, aware that it is not appropriate to expose Ria to adult content due to her young age. Kirino tries to share her passion for Maruru's masterpiece with Ria, but Ria shows no interest in anything unrelated to athletics. Ria decides to explore on her own and comes across doujinshis, where she sees content and animation. This encounter leaves her traumatized as she sees a figure that resembles her participating in attacks. Kirino removes Ria from that situation and gives her a keychain with the image of a character that resembles her. He explains to her that he took her to Akihabara to share their own interests, as Ria is only focused on the race. While for Kirino, there is much more to explore. Ria shows interest in discovering new things, although she actually came to Japan to seek a rematch in a race against Kirino. Ria feels that her previous defeat was not a matter of luck, and so she came to face Kirino with determination. Kyusuke observes that Ria excels as a runner, while Kirino just tries too hard, which causes him some annoyance. Despite this, Kyusuke encourages Kirino to give her best effort in the competition. After the race, Ria teases Kirino about her victory, but prepares to return to her country. She had another ulterior motive for her visit, though, to find out why Kirino was able to beat her, and she believes the answer lies in the influence of her brother Kyusuke. However, Kyusuke is speechless because he knows it was only because he was able to play forbidden games again when he went to see her, but he can't tell her that, so he simply nods to everything Ria says. Kirino is saddened by Ria's departure, though she also experiences some relief as dealing with sisters can be exhausting. Kyusuke feels a bit strange about the situation, since he has to live through such family dynamics every day. Before entering the house, Kirino asks Kyusuke for something that takes him by surprise, as he never imagined that his sister would ask him to be her boyfriend. It turns out she wants him to pretend to be her boyfriend, to convince a modeling agency representative who wants to take her to Europe for modeling. This representative tries to bribe Kyusuke to break up with Kirino, but despite his doubts, he continues with his act and shows affection to avoid suspicion that they are lying. However, the next day they have to go on a date to reject the representative. To make their performance more convincing, they decide to go to the movies and walk hand in hand, but they run into Manami. Manami is surprised to see Kyusuke and Kirino acting like a couple, although the latter is delighted to see Manami's concern, thinking that she has stolen her boyfriend. After the movie, Kyusuke calms Kirino, allowing her to show her otaku side. However, this puts her in a bad mood. They decide to go for a meal to relax, and unfortunately, they run into Kanako, who was also eating there with her co-worker named Bridget. The protagonist has to continue pretending to be Kirino's boyfriend, as Bridget is interested in knowing how they fell in love. Kirino tells Kanako and Bridget that Kyusuke always supports her and is hopelessly in love with her. Kyusuke exaggerates a bit more, listing all of Kirino's virtues, making her nervous because of how serious it sounds. However, Kyusuke clarifies that he is only doing it for the performance. To demonstrate how in love they are, they decide to take pictures with heart-shaped frames. As they leave, Kuro sees them holding hands, and Kyusuke almost stops pretending, but Kirino stops him and takes him away to prevent him from ruining the act. Back at home, Kirino begins to complain about how bad the date was, which annoys the protagonist because in reality, he is just her brother. Kirino gets angry and mentions that she will call her real boyfriend next time. This statement leaves Kyusuke thoughtful, as he never imagined his sister had a boyfriend. He asks Kuro if the boyfriend thing is serious, but she knows nothing about it and changes the subject to talk about this year's Comiket. She asks him to inform Kirino to form the dream team together with Sori. Finally, weeks later, Comiket arrives and they are surprised to see Kuro, who is wearing a dress instead of her medieval cosplay. Kyusuke tells her she looks very pretty. During Comiket, Kirino becomes impatient because she isn't selling any copies at first, but Kuro reassures her since after the first copy, sales increased significantly. Kuro gets very excited because in the previous season, she only sold 10%, so selling everything feels like a dream come true. Later, Kirino realizes that the Maruro big screen episode is about to start, and everyone rushes to watch it. However, a handsome guy no one knows greets Kirino out of nowhere. It turns out that the owner of the company that wanted to recruit Kirino is a man named Kuki, who is also a designer, famous, wealthy, and even an otaku. Kyosuke feels relieved because he believes he can leave Kirino in his hands. The next day, Ayase calls the protagonist to her house, but disappointment fills the air when instead of receiving a confession from a cute girl, he ends up being handcuffed out of fear that he might do something strange. Kyosuke promises her that he won't do anything weird since, after all, she was the one who called him. However, Ayase can't trust him after seeing a photo of him being very close to Kirino. Our guy explains that it was all a misunderstanding and that he was only pretending to prevent Kirino from being recruited. Ayase sets him free now that everything makes more sense, but she gets upset upon learning that Kirino might have a boyfriend, even though she had already noticed many interested suitors. Later, Kuro tells the protagonist that he seems too calm, thinking that Kirino is in good hands. Kyosuke asks Kuro what she feels for him, and she doesn't hesitate to say that she loves him. The conversation is interrupted when Kirino becomes jealous upon seeing her brother being affectionate with Kuro. Kirino officially announces that she's in a relationship with Kuki, and that they have made some progress, such as kissing. Kuro gets angry, thinking that Kirino only did it to annoy Kyosuke. He also becomes upset and argues that the conversation had nothing to do with the party they were having, and Kirino is free to make her own decisions without having to tell everyone. The party is completely ruined due to this conflict. Later on, Kirino invites Koki to her house, and Kyosuke acts hostile toward him without apparent reason, which infuriates Kirino and leads her to kick him out of the room. The protagonist doesn't understand why he feels so uncomfortable when Koki hasn't done anything wrong. But his father also opposes the relationship, adding further tension. The father attempts to intervene forcefully, but Kyosuke stops him and sincerely apologizes to Kirino since he doesn't actually want her to have a boyfriend. He asks Kirino to break off their supposed relationship. Koki is relieved to hear this as he was pretending to be her boyfriend at Kirino's request, so Kyosuke would understand how it feels. In reality, they hadn't been dating, and there had been no physical contact. Koki leaves and reveals that the representative sent him to seduce Kirino to join the company, and that he had always known they were siblings due to their bad acting. However, Koki understands the close relationship between the siblings and decides to give up. With everything resolved, Kyosuke visits Kuro the next day to let her know they will have the party again, but Kuro wanted to see him to ask him to be her boyfriend. Kyosuke is left speechless, which makes Kuro believe that he probably hates her, but in reality, he just wasn't expecting this confession. Kuro negotiates with him, offering delicious lunches and assuring him that nobody will love him more than she will for the rest of his life if he accepts being her boyfriend. Kyosuke, with seriousness, asks her for some time to think about his answer. Upon arriving home, Kirino scolds Kyosuke for his behavior in front of Koki, suggesting that if he had been her real boyfriend, he wouldn't have had to prove his love in that way. Kyosuke defends himself, explaining that it was the only thing he could do to fight against a decision that depended solely on Kirino. Kirino is touched by his response and asks him a favor, that if someone confesses to him seriously, he takes it seriously as well. Later, Kyosuke goes to Manami's store to buy some sweets, and she notices he's worried about something related to Kuro. Although Kyosuke doesn't want to reveal his thoughts, Manami brings up Kuro as the source of his concern because there are rumors about their relationship at school. She advises him, just like Kirino, to consider his feelings. The next day, the comiket party that Kirino had ruined is repeated. After a characteristic display of Kyosuke's strong bond with Kirino, he accompanies Kuro to a nearby park to give his answer to her proposal. After a long reflection, Kyosuke decides to accept Kuro's offer to be her boyfriend. Nervous, Kuro contacts Kyosuke by phone and decides to go to the club, which surprises her brothers and makes her worry. When Kyosuke tries to casually encounter her at the club, his plan is interrupted by Kuki, who accompanies him to the video game club and asks an awkward question about when it's a good time to touch his girlfriend's breasts. Although Kyosuke receives an unhelpful answer, they decide to visit the club. At the club, Sina, upon seeing Kyosuke arrive with Koki, reacts excitedly to the presence of a handsome boy, and her Fujoshi mind goes into action. To avoid an uncomfortable conversation, Kyosuke threatens to touch Sina's breasts if she doesn't calm down. Sena withdraws and suggests they should allow Koki to join the club to have another handsome boy in the group. Kuro arrives at the club at that moment, and to Kyosuke's surprise, Sena assumes that they were already dating, taking them by surprise as they've only been in a relationship for one day. Koki is also confused because he thought Kyosuke's girlfriend was Kirino. Mura, a member of the expedition club, decides to take the others to Makeda's house, leaving Kyosuke and Kuro to talk, even though the atmosphere becomes awkward. Kuro shares with Kyosuke that she has been thinking about him all night and even created a book with illustrations of everything they want to do together. Instead of finding it strange, Kyosuke appreciates the help since he's never had a girlfriend and doesn't know what to do. They decide to have a date, which was the first thing Kuro imagined in her fantasies about her relationship with Kyosuke. Upon arriving home, Kirino confronts Kyosuke for placing their photo on the refrigerator, as she doesn't want anyone to discover her more humble side. The protagonist doesn't see any issue with it and tries to calm her down as best as he can, confessing that he is dating Kuro. However, Kirino reacts with indifference and refrains from commenting. On the other hand, Kuro starts working on a new cosplay costume because now that she's in a relationship, she doesn't want to maintain her dark style. She opts to create an even more eye-catching angel costume compared to her previous outfits. Despite Kyosuke's initial apprehension, they start their date as if it were a normal outing. Kuro is surprised to realize that Kyosuke has experience with dating, thanks to his relationship with Kirino. The date turns out to be fun, and they even hold hands, though Kuro wonders if Kyosuke feels uncomfortable or if he can't talk to her in the same way he does with Kirino. Kyosuke assures her that he's not bored at all and has enjoyed the date, especially because he's learned a lot from her in just one day. Kuro is pleased to know that Kyosuke had fun since that was the purpose of her date according to her book, to achieve her ultimate goal, to see Kirino and Kyosuke happy. Kyosuke, not fully understanding the plan, decides to go along with it, and the next step is for Kuro to visit his house. Kyosuke takes the opportunity to send his siblings out to play, leaving them alone at home, which embarrasses him a bit due to the possible implications. Kuro, on the other hand, puts on her favorite romantic anime scenes and then asks Kyosuke to wait while she takes a shower. This ignites Kyosuke's imagination, but Kuro's sisters return from playing and are surprised to find their otaku sister with their real boyfriend. Hinata and Tamaki, the sisters, introduce themselves as usual, but Hinata notices that Kuro is in the shower and begins to suspect what they were doing alone. Kyosuke isn't very good at making up excuses, so Kuro has to come out quickly to clarify the situation, although Hinata remains somewhat inquisitive. This creates a little tension in the situation. The days of dating continue, and Kuro even visits Kyosuke's house to hang out. Kirino is concerned about the activities they might engage in behind closed doors, which suggests she still cares about Kyosuke. Despite this, Kuro proceeds with her book plan and takes them to a festival to watch the fireworks. The date turns out to be wonderful, and Kyosuke admits that he now loves Kuro even more than when he agreed to be her boyfriend. Kuro is glad to see that everything is going as planned and only the last step remains, breaking up with Kyosuke. Kyosuke is in shock when he suddenly learns that Kuro has broken up with him. To make matters worse, he finds out that Kuro is moving to another city. In his desperation, he seeks out Kirino and gives her a slap on the head to wake her up, as now he needs her help. Kirino asks him if he still loves her despite the way she left him, to which Kyosuke responds affirmatively, even crying, and Kirino decides to help him find Kuro at all costs. To track down Kuro, Kirino sends her a text message and discovers that she's in a hot spring town, though she doesn't reveal her exact address. Together, they start looking for her, as Kuro is easily recognizable due to her cosplay. However, despite asking many questions, they don't manage to find her. When they are about to take a break, it's Kuro who finds them. Kirino grabs her to prevent her from escaping and asks her why she left so suddenly. Kuro explains that she went out with Kyosuke to fulfill her dream, but realized that Kirino didn't like the idea of her dating her brother, even though Kirino accepted it at the time. Kuro wants to know why Kirino wants to reconcile if she feels that way, and Kirino admits that she harbors deep resentment toward her brother and doesn't want him to have a girlfriend because she can't stand the idea of someone else being more important to Kyosuke than her. Kuro doesn't understand why Kirino wants to make amends if she feels so much hatred, but Kirino explains that Kyosuke has always supported her when she needed it the most, and that thanks to him, she could become who she is. That's why she now wants to do the same for him. After sharing their feelings, Kuro poses the big question to Kyosuke, but seeing that the answer will be negative, she decides she doesn't need to hear it and is overwhelmed by all the accumulated fatigue. When she wakes up, Kuro tells them that her family is moving because of her father's job, although it won't be an insurmountable distance to meet on weekends. Kirino realizes that everything is as it was when they started, and Kuro decides to move forward with her plans to be happy. After moving, she makes some modifications and draws herself alongside Kyosuke and Kirino in an image. Kyosuke realizes that his dream is close to coming true. Despite all the challenges, Kyosuke and Kirino understand each other better than ever, and although Kuro no longer attends their school, they are by no means estranged. Going back a bit in the past, before Kuro and Kyosuke started dating, the latter couldn't stop saying to Ayase that she was his angel and that he would marry her. In response, Ayase used to handcuff him out of habit, and when the protagonist promises not to do it again, she doesn't believe him. What bothers Ayase the most is that now he has a girlfriend, which means that his relationship with Kirino will become colder, and she won't be able to help her friend when she needs it. Due to this situation, Ayase kicks him out of her house, and they remain estranged for a while. However, Manami calls her to inform her that Kyosuke and Kuro have broken up. Upon learning that she had nothing to do with the breakup, Ayase feels guilty, as she had thought that Kyosuke broke up with his girlfriend because of her or something like that. Nevertheless, she becomes even more upset when she finds out that she had no influence on the separation and asks him for another favor. This time, she wants him to accompany her to Kanako's concert, where she will dance as the official cosplayer during the performance of the singer who sang the opening theme of the Maruru series. When she meets Kyosuke, she realizes that he was supposedly fired for harassment, and Bridget, Kanako's employee, is scared when she sees him. Ayase thinks it's because of his appearance, but in reality, he looks suspiciously similar to Kirino's boyfriend. Despite her doubts, Ayase doesn't say anything, and Kanako doesn't even realize that he's the same guy she saw in the restaurant, so she treats him like one of her employees. Ayase is surprised to see Kyosuke unusually calm, but the calm doesn't last long. Kirino was also going to attend the concert, as she wouldn't miss one of Maruru. However, it seems she won't be able to arrive on time because her photo session was delayed. Upon receiving that message, Kyosuke rushes to her workplace to pick her up before the concert starts. To get there quickly, he borrows the most Otaku bicycle that exists, which leads to him being stopped at Kirino's workplace, where they think he's a stalker. Kirino admits that he's her brother, although it hurts her to do so. She pretends that she finds Maruru's Otaku bicycle disgusting, even though she's fascinated by it, and she takes him away to talk in private. Kyosuke tells her that he came to pick her up for the concert anyway. Kirino feels defeated, but eventually agrees to change her outfit, and with the help of the representative Misaki, they solve the problems. Both of them rush to the concert. Kirino can't believe that her first bike ride with her brother is so surreal, and Kyosuke thinks the same, as the embarrassment is almost uncontrollable. Nevertheless, they arrive just in time for the performance of the official singer of the opening. Kyosuke takes Kirino's hand and leads her to their seats, so she thanks him for everything he has done for her once again. Days later, Kyosuke's mother asks him if he did something unusual to Kirino because they suddenly become much closer, and they found a picture attached to the refrigerator. Kyosuke tries to defend himself by saying that nothing bad happened, and his father believes him. However, his father asks him to prove that they can trust him by moving out and getting a perfect score on the entrance exam so that he can come back home. Our protagonist accepts this challenge, moves out, and thinks that everything has improved now that Kirino isn't distracting him all the time. However, Manami knows that the last time he said that he felt lonely, so she decides to throw a party for him to celebrate living alone. When he arrives home, Kirino is waiting for him with a refrigerator as a gift. Kyosuke promises her that he will get a perfect score to return as soon as possible, although Kirino doesn't have much faith in him as he has never been one of the top students at school. Despite that, she decides to trust him and gives him a game to relax during breaks. The protagonist accepts it and starts studying hard for the exam. Shortly after, Kanako calls him to offer a job as a representative, but our protagonist declines because he needs to study. Kanako decides to visit him because she wants him to taste what she has learned to cook. While Kyosuke does his best to finish the dish, Kanako surprises him by realizing that he's Kirino's brother, although she almost discovers that he's an otaku because he attended Maruru's concert. However, she thinks that Kyosuke took her to the concert because she can't imagine that the perfect Kirino has those tastes. Nevertheless, Kyosuke realizes that Kanako cares a lot about her sister, and he's glad to have her as a friend. Later, Kyosuke falls asleep after studying a lot, and Ayase wakes him up early to give him a gift. He thinks she finally came to take his life, but it turns out to be a knife sheath since she found out from Manami that he's living alone. Moreover, she was also invited to the party he will throw for him, which makes Kyosuke a fan of Manami again. Kirino's invitation to the party seems a bit awkward, because Ayase and Kuro don't get along very well, but both Ayase and Kyosuke want to improve their relationship. At that moment, someone else rings the doorbell and Ayase goes to see. Kuro is surprised the girl answered the door, but our protagonist tries to calm them down because tension is in the air when Ayase acts jealous of her ex-girlfriend visiting Kyosuke. Kuro clings to the fact that they are not together anymore and that she shouldn't care if other people visit Kyosuke, but Ayase disagrees with the idea of the ex being around Kyosuke. They have an epic fight to see who shouldn't be there, as Kuro has not given up on Kyosuke, and for some reason that she doesn't understand, it also bothers Ayase. Amid all the fighting, Kuro has to go to school, and Ayase also leaves because she doesn't want people to think she wants to stay by the protagonist's side. He takes this opportunity to invite Kuro to the party because the more, the merrier. Kuro wanted to talk to him alone because there's still something they haven't discussed, and Kyosuke knows it very well. He promises her that he won't have any other romantic interests until he returns home, so Kuro relaxes and focuses on helping in any way she can until he comes back to his house. Days pass, and the day of the party arrived, so all the girls gathered at the protagonist's apartment to make preparations. Kirino was upset to see that Manami was at the party and moreover, that she had been invited to improve their relationship. Despite her annoyance, Kirino decided to get along with Manami for this day as the party was intended to support her brother. When she saw Ayase, she thanked her for caring about her as she always did. By pure chance, Kanako came to the protagonist's house to deliver lunch. Ayase and Kirino ran to ask why she was there and what kind of relationship she had with Kyosuke. Kanako took the opportunity to joke, saying they were dating, but they clarified the situation. The party continued, although Kanako was a bit upset because the protagonist didn't eat her food alone, which irritated Kuro, as she now had another competitor who wanted to take care of Kyosuke, and the tension was felt in the air. Manami tried to calm things down as neither of the two was able to take care of Kyosuke at that moment. However, this only made things worse because now all the girls were fighting to see who could attend to Kyosuke while he was studying. Kirino got upset because if they went to the apartment constantly, they would only be distracting Kyosuke from his studies. She decided that Ayase would be the one to help the protagonist with house chores, mainly because she supposedly hated him and wouldn't be a distraction. Ayase agreed, freeing up her schedule and going to Kyosuke's house every day to cook and clean. Also, he could concentrate on his studies. However, having a beauty like Ayase in his house was already a distraction, and Kyosuke tried to spy on her while she was taking a shower. Unfortunately, Kuro sent Hinata to keep an eye on Kyosuke, and she arrived at the worst possible moment as Ayase came out of the shower, creating the impression that Kyosuke was a womanizer. Quickly, she explained that they were just doing household chores and not doing anything inappropriate. In the following days, Kyosuke began to feel bad for Ayase because she was making too much effort just to help him, although she didn't see it that way. She felt great gratitude towards him for saving her relationship with Kirino and wanted to apologize because even though she realized that the strange person who played games was Kirino, she chose to believe her lie and hate Kyosuke in order to continue being friends. The day of the exam arrived and Kyosuke passed it easily, which allowed him to return home without any problems. Before leaving the apartment, Ayase intercepted him to confess her feelings. The protagonist apologized because he already had feelings for someone else, which led Ayase to burst into tears and hit him while trying to convince him of her love. It turned out that Kyosuke had caught her attention from the beginning because he could become Kirino's brother, but as time passed, she fell more and more in love with him. Finally, they decided to say goodbye with a kiss, as this would mark the end of her feelings for him. On the other hand, Kirino remembers when she was little and greatly admired her brother because he was good at sports and studies. However, as she grew up, her brother stopped taking her to play like he used to. Furthermore, his friendship with Minami became increasingly closer, which made her jealous, but she couldn't chase after her brother, who was getting further away from her. Therefore, she decided to change and pay him back for everything he had put her through. For this, she started practicing athletics and studying a lot. Over time, Kyosuke became much more relaxed and started to want a normal life instead of being cool. Kirino believed that our boy had stopped being her brother. She even went to Minami to try to get him back, thinking it was her fault that he had become so lazy. However, Minami told her that the cool brother she admired so much never existed, and that he had always been the same brother she had. Obviously, Kirino didn't believe a word of it, so she continued to strive and began to ignore the protagonist because she wanted to talk to him when her cool brother returned to show him that she had also become a sister worthy of admiration. She even got into modeling, but her brother's absence continued to leave a void which was only filled when she saw the games. This hobby instantly grew on her and she started to prefer the game sisters over her real brother, but she knew she couldn't openly boast about her hobby because her friends would look down on her. Nevertheless, her brother accepted her, and she realized that Minami was right in saying that the cool brother never existed because her normal brother had also put in the effort at all times to defend her. Therefore, she now understands that even if he's not a cool brother, he will always be there for her. Weeks later, Christmas is just around the corner. Kyosuke feels obligated to tell Kuro what he really feels, so he rushes to her house. However, she already knew that our boy was going to see her and waited for him in the park to hear what he had to say. The protagonist apologizes in advance because he can't date her since he has someone else in his heart. Hearing this breaks Kuro's heart and shatters the illusion she had of a happy ending with our boy. She then bursts into tears and curses him to stay away from her once and for all. Upon returning home, Kyosuke invites Kirino to go out on Christmas to Akihabara, but she refuses because they already went together last year, and this time she wants to have a normal day. The protagonist brings out the big guns and shows her all the games that are on sale that day for couples. To top it off, he offers to go to downtown Tokyo to end the day as non-Otaku people. Kirino accepts without much further thought since she is indeed crazy about games that are on sale. To her surprise, his friend and Sina also applied the same strategy. But since our boy discovered them, the vendor finds out they are siblings. They have no choice but to claim they are also a couple. After witnessing that embarrassing scene, Kyosuke decides to go to a hotel to leave all of Kirino's purchases. She reacts normally as she finds it suspicious to be invited to a hotel on Christmas, although she also admits that it's a good idea to wait there playing games until nightfall, when they can go to the skyscraper. So that's what they end up doing. Just before ending their date, the protagonist talks about Kirino's future plans since she wants to go back to America, but this time doing things right, communicating with her friends and family. Therefore, our boy confesses before she leaves that he's in love with someone. Kirino refuses to listen further and runs away. Kyosuke pursues her as far as he can, but she is much faster. Fortunately, Sora was spying on him along with her sister and Kuro, so she gives the protagonist a ride until they manage to catch up with Kirino. Our boy finishes his confession because the person he loves is her, and that's why he asks her to stay in the country. However, as expected, Kirino refuses since real life is not a game where you can date your younger sister. Although Kyosuke doesn't care because romance seems equally bad to him, whether with a cute girl or with his sister. That's why he rejected precious people like Ayase or Kuro to be with his sister, the one he loves the most. To make matters even more interesting, Kuro plays back the explanation of why he had rejected her, where he shouts to the world how much he loves Kirino. This leads Kyosuke to not miss the opportunity and repeats the same, shouting to the world that he wants her to stay by his side as husband and wife, even moving Kirino to the point that she accepts this risky adventure. Then they return to the hotel, and Kirino is upset because what Kyosuke proposed is still crazy, as they can't even get married in reality because they are siblings. Nevertheless, their feelings for each other are now clear. Kirino decides to finish what they started, which is the game they left hanging when they went to the skyscraper. Our protagonist is beside her because he knows from the beginning what she's like, so he has no complaints about accompanying her while she plays. They also plan to get some ideas for their sibling relationship, but for some reason, Kirino is not in the mood to play. The protagonist takes the opportunity to give her the Christmas present he hadn't been able to give her until now. Kirino is very happy since it's the ring she asked for last Christmas and couldn't buy for her at that time. Just remembering everything they've been through in a single year cheers her up, so she gives him a thankful kiss, and they go back to playing the game. However, the idea of getting ideas from there is immediately canceled because these games go way too far and neither of them reaches that point. The next day, they tell their friends about their sibling relationship. Sori doesn't know whether to congratulate them, so she's just glad that Kirino won't move to the United States, so their meetings can continue as usual. In honor of those meetings, Kuro and Kirino continue their eternal battle to defend their favorite anime as the masterpieces of all time. While they both fight, Kyosuke receives a message from Kanako inviting him to her concert, but she wants him to come alone because there's something important she needs to tell him. So he goes to see her as she asks, and he is surprised when Kanako declares her love in the middle of the concert to use social pressure. However, this doesn't work as our protagonist has a girlfriend and loves her too much. Kanako gives up to become the world's best singer and hopes that Kyosuke will regret his decision. The next day, Kirino wakes up in the protagonist's bed, which scares him because it's the scene taken from a game. He takes the opportunity to touch her chest, but Kirino was just pretending to be asleep, so she accuses him of being weird without any basis. Then Kirino changes the subject because she wants to do something very couple-like, which is exchanging things, but our protagonist realizes she just wants him to store some of her otaku stuff because she's run out of space. Kirino tells him it will be an equivalent exchange, even though it's obvious that the things he will bring from his room can't be compared. Anyway, Kyushu agrees to take a lot of her otaku stuff, although it can't be games because anyone who enters his room would hang him for playing those games when he has his sister right there. While taking the things, our protagonist sees the album Kirino didn't let him see when she called him for her last favor, and this time she allows him to see it. He's surprised to find that it contains photos of him as a child. There was also an audio message in which the young Kirino left a message for herself, so she won't forget how much she loves her brother as she dreamed of being her older brother's favorite since she was a child. She asked herself for help not to let that dream end, and Kyosuke and Kirino are more than willing to fulfill the dream of the Kirino, who once admired her older brother the most. Weeks later, the protagonist graduates from school and bids farewell to all his classmates who accompanied him throughout his time at the academy. Now, a completely different life begins, and Kirino comes to pick him up, taking advantage of the fact that she quickly left her high school graduation. Manami was also waiting for them because she wants to have her final showdown with Kirino over our protagonist, and both are eager to resolve things between them once and for all. In a completely different reality, Kyosuke thinks they're only going to argue because they should be together, but Manami was literal when she said fight, as she starts with a punch and Kirino doesn't hold back. They end up fighting as if it were a wrestling match until the protagonist stops them as best as he can. Manami calms down a bit and tries to convince our protagonist that it's crazy to date his sister because they simply can't get married and don't have a future together since they can never admit that they are a couple, not even to their parents. Despite this, the protagonist is willing to endure everything to be by Kirino's side. Manami presents hypothetical scenarios in which they tell their parents what they are doing, so Kyushu begs her on his knees not to do it. However, in case that doesn't work, he's willing to run away with Kirino as if it were a game for adults. So Manami decides to change her strategy and confesses her love to him in an attempt to make him leave Kirino. But even then, the protagonist rejects her because his decision is made, and the only one he wants is Kirino. Kirino slaps him after Manami leaves defeated as she feels he's doing something foolish after rejecting all the cute girls who have confessed to him since he'll never be this popular again in his life. The protagonist is the one who knows it best, but he's already made his decision, and that's not going to change. He even moves heaven and earth to arrange a wedding that accepts siblings thanks to all the contacts he has made in recent years. The ceremony proceeds as usual, and they share a kiss to seal their vows. However, after fulfilling her dream, Kirino tells the protagonist that it's time to end as they had planned. It turns out that on Christmas, they agreed to be lovers until they graduated, but after getting married, they wouldn't have to break up to become an ordinary brother-sister couple. Everything returns to normal as it was before Kyosuke realized his feelings. He only accompanies her as her older brother, who just wants to protect the happiness of his cute younger sister.